Hey everybody, it's Dak here from the Ed Boys, and welcome to my Moons of Peril guide. The Moons of Peril are 3 bosses located in Napotsley. It's a dungeon in Varlamore. These bosses are like the next generation of Barrows brothers. You fight one of the 3 moons at a time, and you can loot the chest at the end for a potential reward from any of the 3 of them. In this guide, we're going to go over the requirements for the Moons of Peril, then the gear and inventory that you should use, and then how to travel to the dungeon. We'll talk about the mechanics for gathering supplies in the setup section of the guide, then we'll go over the actual mechanics for each of the bosses. I'll then do a full run before we talk about the potential rewards that you can get from the Moons of Peril. There will be chapters on the timeline so that you can skip to whichever part of the video that you need. To have access to the Moons of Peril, you do have to complete the Perilous Moons Quest. The quest takes place in the dungeon. It'll have you build some camps in there, as well as take on your first fight of each boss. After that, we just have recommended stats, technically not a requirement, as I'm sure you can manage to get kills with very low stats overall. Just remember, the higher your stats are, the better the boss and grind is going to go for you. I do suggest at least 70 plus in attack, strength, and defense to get started grinding here, as well as having 70 prayer and piety unlocked, which is very nice for your melee DPS. To make supplies during your run, you will need at least 20 hunter or 20 fishing, 30 cooking, and 38 herb lore. It's not required to make supplies during the run, since you could bring in some with you, but it's just better to make the supplies in the dungeon. We're going to see more of that when we talk about these setup mechanics. Next, we're going to talk about the gear that you will bring into the Moons of Peril. You will be using a melee setup since the bosses are each weak to a different melee style. Defense is incredibly important in this content. Your protection prayers do not work against the moons, and when you do take hits, you're going to be inflicted with a debuff known as the Curse of the Moons, which we are going to talk about more in the shared mechanics section of the guide. This means in some cases, defense is going to be more important than your strength bonus against these bosses. You don't need max gear by any means to fight these guys. They're not super strong, but of course, if you have the best in slot options, then you still want to use them. I'm going to go over each gear slot, showing the best down to the lowest option I would use, and the names that are highlighted in green are the ones that I'm wearing in the screenshot, which is the setup I use in my group Iron Man. The Torva full helm is going to be best in slot, followed by the Nate is Not face guard and the Serpentine helm. Now the Justiciar face guard is very good for high defense, though any Barrows helm like Guthans, Varix, or Torags is going to be solid from there. After that, you can go Helm of Nate is Not, a Berserker helm, or the lowest I would send is probably a Dragon Med helm. The Infernal cape is best in slot for your cape option, but clearly the Inferno is a bit harder than Moons of Peril, so the Fire cape will do fine. You can get the Mythical cape after completing Dragon Slayer 2. A trimmed skill cape also has nice bonuses, and the Obsidian cape will still give you some extra defense. The Amulet of Torture is best in slot, though soon it looks like it's going to be passed from the Araxor amulet. The Fury still has a nice strength bonus, as well as some very good defensive stats for an amulet. From there, you can go for a Glory, Amulet of Power, or at the lowest, a Strength amulet, which is nice for a strength bonus, but no defensive stats. The ammo slot is pretty straightforward. Rada's Blessing 4 is a +2 prayer bonus, and then every other blessing is a +1 prayer bonus. For your weapon slot, there are a lot of options. Each boss is weak to a different melee style, so you'll need to use multiple weapons, though it is worth noting that the Zami Hasta has all 3 attack styles, Stab, Slash, and Crush, so if you have this weapon, it is very convenient to use. It's a good weapon for each option, but it's not best in slot for any of those styles, so let's go over the best options for each one. For your Crush option, best in slot is actually a Scythe on the Crush attack style, followed by the dual Maquahitos, which are actually a reward from this content. From there, you have the Inquisitor's Mace, the Zami Hasta, the Abyssal Bludgeon, the Sarachnis Cudgel, and then the Zombie Axe is actually a very solid option for how cheap and how low level it is. For Slash, we still have Scythe as best in slot, though it is insanely expensive for just some Moons of Peril gains. Then we have the Blade of Saelador as the next best Slash weapon. The Grazi Rapier on Slash actually squeezes in there pretty nicely. After that, you have the Abyssal Tentacle, Abyssal Whip, that Zami Hasta, and again, the Zombie Axe. That Zombie Axe being a budget option for both Slash and Crush makes it very good for getting started on your Moons of Peril gains. And finally, for Stab, the Grazi Rapier is going to be your best, which is kind of nice since you could also use it as your Slash weapon. The Blade of Saelador is a fine stab option as well, if that's what you were using for Slash. From there, you can go with the Voidwaker on Stab, the Zami Hasta, the Abyssal Dagger, or the Osmumten's Fang. The Fang usually is your go-to stab weapon for bossing, but the Eclipse Moon does not have very high defense, so faster weapons with a good max hit are going to be a little bit better than the Fang. It's very convenient to use a weapon that has multiple styles on it. It's also not that big of a deal to bring a setup that has like 3 different options, like a Whip, a Cudgel, and an Abyssal Dagger. You have plenty of inventory space to work with. In the shield slot, the Dragonfire Shield is great since it has high defense and a good strength bonus. From there, you have the classic Avernic Defender, Defender, then the Dragon Defender. If you don't have a Dragon Defender, you could send the Obsidian Shield or the Crystal Shield. In your chest and leg slot, Torva is still best in slot. Justiciar is going to be better than any other strength gear outside of Torva. After that, I would send Barrows like Guthan's, Torax, or Varric's armor. And then you have the typical Bandos top and bottom, followed by a fighter torso with Dragon Plate legs. Even the bot setup of like a Granite Plate body and Dragon Plate legs would get you at least some solid defense. Best in slot gloves are the Ferocious gloves. The Barrows gloves aren't that much worse, and they do have great defense on them, making them also very good. From there, you can go down the line of recipe for disaster gloves. You have the Dragon, the Rune, Addy gloves, and whatnot. It is worth noting that the Regen bracelet has the same stats as Addy gloves, and the Combat bracelet has the same stats as Mithril gloves. Primordial boots are best in slot and melee, though this is a nice place to try out the Echo boots that were also added during the Varlamore Part 1 expansion. Echo boots are a little less expensive to invest in, but also make sure to toggle off the recoil effect so you don't waste any money on those charges. Dragon boots are still a fine option. I would take them over Guardian boots personally. Then you have Granite boots, or worst case scenario, Rune boots will still be fine. Finally, that ring slot, you have the Ultor, which is best in slot, though very expensive, followed by an imbued Berserker ring, which is not that much worse than an Ultor and significantly cheaper. The Ring of Suffering has some very good defensive stats, especially if you imbue it. If you find that you're tanking too many hits, it's not a bad option to switch over to that Ring of Suffering. The moons aren't super strong, so there really is a large variety of gear that you can possibly use in the dungeon. If you have any questions about the gear setup at all, let me know in the comments and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Next, we have the inventory. Up top, I have my weapons. I am wielding a Zami Hasta, so I don't have any main weapon switches. I do have the Dragon Dagger to use for special attacks, though Dragon Claws would be a little bit stronger if you do have them. I brought a God Sword with me for a slow, hard-hitting weapon. There is a phase during the Eclipse Moon that this helps a lot with. Jump down to the bottom, I have my rune pouch, which has fire, cosmic, and blood runes, and then I have the Book of the Dead so I can summon thralls for a little bonus DPS. I have a rope and a big fishing net to get food during the run. You can just choose one or the other, whether you're using hunter or fishing. And then I have a pestle and mortar to make potions during the run, though these last few items you can get within the dungeon. The rest of the space is going to be filled up with potions and food that you're going to get during the setup portion. You could bring an emergency teleport, but you really shouldn't need it. Now let's talk about how to get to the dungeon and go over the dungeon map. Nepotzli is located in the western part of Varlamore. There is a Quetzal landing spot up on the mountain that is automatically unlocked while completing the Twilight's Promise quest. There's another landing spot that you can build close to the cave entrance as well, which saves a little bit of time, but there is a bank inside Cam Torum, which is the name of the mountain, and you rarely need to bank while sending these runs anyways, so having to take the long walk is not that big of a deal. You can also use a calcified moth, which is a tradable item that you can buy on the Grand Exchange, which is going to teleport you into Cam Torum. Once you're inside Cam Torum, the actual entrance to Nepotzli is located up north. Here's a look at the actual dungeon map, though it looks a little bit more confusing on paper than it actually is. I find it easier to learn the dungeon layout while just actually sending some runs, so you might find it better to learn the layout from the full run section of the guide. It's really not too bad though. The main room is known as the Antechamber. From here, there are 3 paths. The northeast path will take you to the Steambound Cavern. The northwest path will take you to the Earthbound Cavern, and then the southwest path will take you to the Ancient Prison. From each of these 3 rooms, you can enter one of the boss fights. The Steambound Cavern has the door to the Eclipse Moon, the Earthbound Cavern has the door to the Blue Moon, and the door to the Blood Moon's lair is located in the Ancient Prison. All of these rooms are also attached to each other, so you don't have to keep going back through that main room to get to them. And then finally, there is a loot room with the Lunar Chest, which can be accessed from either the Ancient Prison or the Streambound Cavern. Overall, the dungeon's really not that big, so it won't take you that many kills before you get used to the run. Now let's talk about how to make food and potions within the dungeon. You do have 2 options for food, either fishing or hunting. You can fish in the Streambound Cavern. You're going to need at least 20 fishing and a big fishing net to catch bream. And you will need level 30 cooking to cook these fish, which you can do on a campfire that you built during the quest. The amount of health that each bream heals is based on your fishing and your cooking level. It'll heal for 1/3 of your cooking level or half of your fishing level, whichever of those 2 numbers is the lowest. If you prefer to hunt for your food, you can catch moss lizards in the Earthbound Cavern. You will need a rope and 20 hunter to catch these lizards, and again 30 cooking to cook them. To catch the lizards, you got to click on each of these rocks east of the camp, which will set up the trap using your rope. Once you've set up the traps, you can then click on this bush, and some lizards are going to go running out into the traps, and then you can cook these lizards at a campfire, which can give you up to 3 pieces of food per lizard if you do have higher cooking, though with low levels, you're just going to get that 1 food per lizard most of the time. A cooked lizard heals for 33% of your cooking working, or 50% of your hunter level, again, whichever is lowest. You can do the math to see which food is going to give you the most health based on your levels, but also you could just get like one of each, like fish and a moss lizard, and then just eat them when you're low health to see which one gives you more. There is one potion that you can make in the dungeon, a moonlight potion. This is a super combat, a divine defense, and a prayer potion all in one, and it won't inflict that 10 damage like a normal divine defense potion would do. To make these, you will need vials of water and moonlight grub paste. You can get the paste by picking moonlight grubs located near the campsite and then using a pestle and mortar on them to turn them into paste. Vials of water can be grabbed from these crates at any campsite. You can only take 2 vials at a time, and then it makes you wait a few seconds on a cooldown to take more. So you could take a couple of vials, go pick the moonlight grubs that you need, and then come back for a couple more vials. Having a higher herblore level will make it more likely that you make a full potion instead of just a couple of doses. Finally, we have the cup of tea. Since your potion doesn't work as a stamina, you will need some run energy, and you can get that by right-clicking on the campfire and then using the make cuppa option. You don't actually like make a tea that goes into your inventory, it'll just restore your run energy right then and there. This is all you're going to need for supplies to kill the bosses, some food, some moonlight potions, and the occasional cuppa. If you do have any questions about these setup mechanics, let me know in the comments and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Once you have supplies, it's time to fight the bosses. Multiple players can be in the chamber fighting the boss at once, but it's not a team fight at all. You have to do the full 500 damage on your own. You can just see other people working on their own fight. Each boss has pretty similar mechanics. They will always attack with 3 consecutive swipes. If any of these swipes hits a 0, then the remaining hits will also automatically hit a 0. Anytime that you do get hit, you'll be inflicted with the Curse of the Moon debuff. The effect of this debuff is going to be different for each boss. During that 3-hit cycle that the moons are using, they inflict 1, 2, and 5 stacks of this debuff. In other words, the later hits are worse for you, and defense is very important. The higher the stack gets, the worse it's going to be, but we will discuss that for each specific boss in just a sec. The main thing to know is that your best strategy to avoid the Curse of the Moons is having higher defense. In the room, there's 8 spots around the boss. One of them is going to be lit up at a time. You need to be standing on that lit up spot to avoid taking consistent damage. The spot will move after the boss uses 2 sets of standard attacks, so 6 total swipes. Whenever the highlighted spot moves to the new moon or the full moon, the boss is going to use a special attack, each boss having a different set of specs. These bosses also have a mechanic known as flat armor. Flat armor affects how much damage you do on every attack, so a monster with flat armor of 6 is going to take 6 less damage every time you actually hit them. You can have a negative flat armor as well, which will actually increase your hit whenever you do damage. So a negative 6 flat armor increases your hit by 6. This is really nice for multi-hit weapons since each hit will get that added damage. The blue moon is weak to crush attacks, and it has a flat armor of -5, so all of your successful attacks will have +5 damage. The blue moon's curse will automatically stop one of your attacks once it stacks up high enough. You will get a warning message in the chat about this. At 3 stacks, it says the cold is starting to get in. At 9 stacks, it says your joints are starting to lock up. And then at 18 stacks, it'll say your joints lock up as you go to attack. The cold is too much to bear. At this point, your next attack is getting canceled, and it will remove 18 stacks from your curse. These messages aren't really easy to read, but even if they were, there's not that much like you're gonna do about it during the fight. The only way to stop this from happening is to have better defense. When the symbol moves to the full moon, it's gonna use the weapon freeze special attack. 3 chunks of ice will pop up, and one of them will have your weapon in it. You do need to kick or punch the ice that's marked with the little symbol under it. During this time, there's gonna be ice spikes on the ground that you have to dodge. You can get 2 attacks in between each spawn of spiky ice. If you don't get your weapon out of the ice before the attack is over, you will get your weapon back, but you'll take some damage in the process. If you happen to disconnect or log out during this ice phase, then you can get your weapon back from this guy. Don't know how to say his name, but he is hanging out in the loot chamber of the caves. When the symbol on the ground reaches the new moon, you will get the Frost Storm special attack. The braziers on both ends of the room will go out, and you need to relight them. The boss will heal 5 times during this phase. Each time will be 10 health for each brazier that's currently unlit. There's also going to be freezing storms moving across the room, which will deal damage and turn off your run for a couple ticks. You're safe from the storm in the middle of the room. There's also a couple safe spots next to the brazier, not that you're going to stand there for very long anyways. You can kind of ignore this special attack if you have very high DPS, like if you're using the Makohitals or the Scythe, but even if you are doing that, it's still going to be faster to not let the boss heal. The Eclipse Moon is the yellow boss and is weak to stab. She has a flat armor of 6, so all of your attacks will deal 6 less damage. The Eclipse Moon's curse will cause your hits to glance. When your attack glances off her, then your max hit is reduced by 12. The higher your stack, the more likely that you land a glancing hit, maxing out at 100% chance if you have 100 stacks. Basically, more stacks equals less DPS. When the symbol reaches the full moon, it's going to use the clone special attack. You will be teleported to the center of the room, and the clones begin to spawn in sets of 3. When a clone spawns, just click towards it to make your character face the clone, and you will parry its attack. If you don't look at him in time, the clone will hit you, but if you do get the parry, you will actually hit the clone instead with an undelayed attack. This means if you use like a slow, hard-hitting weapon, like an Elder Maul, a God Sword, even full Darox, then you can do a lot of damage during this phase. During this attack, her flat armor is reduced to 4, and the glancing effect will decrease your max hit by 8 instead of 12. When the symbol reaches the new moon, she uses the Searing Rays special attack. The Eclipse Moon will spawn a big ball and push you behind it. It's going to shoot rays at you, and you can dodge them by just standing behind that shield. The shield's going to move around the room at a walking pace, so simply just turn off your run energy and walk behind the shield while it makes a full rotation around the room. The Blood Moon is the red boss, and it is weak to slash. It has a flat armor of -2, so all of your successful hits will be increased by 2 damage. The Blood Moon's curse will heal the boss. When she hits you with 3 swipes, the first attack heals for the damage that it dealt, the second attack heals for twice the damage it dealt, and the third attack will heal for 3 times as much damage as it deals, with a minimum heal of 30 on that third hit. It is very important to have high defense during this fight. Much more important than good DPS, since the boss can just out-heal you if you're tanking too many hits. When the symbol reaches the full moon, she's going to use the Blood Rain attack. Blood will rain from the sky, causing it to pool up in spots on the ground, and you just need to walk around and dodge these pools. If you get hit by them, it's going to heal the boss, but while you're not being hit by them, the boss is actually taking a little bit of chip damage. When the symbol reaches the new moon, she's going to use the Blood Jaguar attack. A bunch of jaguars are going to spawn around the room, and one of them is going to be on a highlighted symbol. You want to attack the jaguar on that highlighted spot. Damage that you deal to the jaguar is going to heal you a little bit, but the jaguar will also attack you, and the only way you can dodge this is by taking a step back, basically flinching it. There's also going to be blood rain spots coming down in a square around the boss, so if you step on those spots too early, you'll take damage, but if you step too late, the jaguar will hit you. The best way to know when to step back is right when the blood spot stops growing. That's when you can click there, and there's also an audio cue, so as soon as the blood pool sound ends, that's when you can step back for that one tick. This is probably the most annoying spec to learn how to dodge, but after a few kills, you will start to get the rhythm of just stepping back for that one tick. That's it for the general boss mechanics. Let's go ahead and put all this together into one full run. First, I'm headed northeast into the stream-bound cavern. This is where I can catch fish, as well as make my moonlight potions. My herb lore level's not too bad, so I just make the 4 potions and see if that gives me a decent amount of doses. So grab 2 vials, grab some grubs, pestle and mortar them, then grab 2 more vials. After that, just fill the rest of the inventory with fish, cook them up, hit up that cup of tea, and now we're running south to first go kill the Eclipse Moon. The Eclipse is weak to stab, so I set my Hasta over to the stab attack style and spawn a Thrall. I did forget to drink a potion right away, so you'll notice I finally sipped that super combat potion and turn on piety, so we have as much DPS as we can get. Simply, we're just slowly circling around the room doing some damage. We have the new moon coming up, so when the symbol moves over to there, we have the Seeing Rays special attack. It's just going to toss me behind this big ball. I did make a mistake on this first one by stepping out a little too quick, but after that little step back, now all I have to do is really just walk around the room. And even though I made that mistake, it was only like 7 damage anyway, so it's not that big of a deal. Once we go a full square around the room, again, we just stand on the highlighted tile and attack with stab. And as he reaches the full moon, he's going to use the clone attack, so I am going to put on my Bando's God Sword because I can hit with each parry with it. Again, with these parries, all you have to do is face the monster. You don't have to actually click on them. Your character can't move. You don't have to do the attack yourself. And it is going to be every 2 ticks that it attacks. Basically, when you see the XP drop, click towards the next one. After that, it teleports us out into the Earthbound Cavern here, where I will first go ahead and sip the cup of tea and then head into the Blue Moon. The Blue Moon is weak to Crush, so I'm setting my Zami Hasta to the Crush attack style, putting on Piety, and hopefully remembering to use a Thrall. Stay on the highlighted tile as much as I can while getting some DPS, and as the dial gets to the New Moon, she's going to use the Frost Storm attack. I don't pay that much attention to trying to dodge the storms, just run over and light the braziers. You don't take that much damage if you get hit by them. It slows you down a little bit, but you're still going to go faster than like the allotted time for the special attack anyways. And overall, you're getting all of your food within the dungeon, so unless you're running out of food, kind of low defense, maybe minimum stats, then it's not that big of a deal to take a few extra hits. Once the attack is over, we go back to following around the dial until we get to the full moon. This is the weapon freeze attack where you're not using your weapon anymore. You just have to kick or punch. Doesn't matter which one you use. And you don't have to use piety on this, really. You're going to have enough time to knock it out, so you can just turn your prayer off. And it's every 2 attacks you use, you'll have to step back to dodge the spiky ice. I do have a tile marked 1 square north of the center tile. That is the safe spot where none of the spiky ice will show up, so you can just camp there when the attack is over. Once we KO the blue moon, it teleports us into the ancient prison. We hit that cup of tea again, and we are pretty close to the blood moon's lair. The blood moon is weak to slash, so I'm switching my Zami Hasta over to slash. If you're bringing multiple weapons, you just switch over to your slash weapon. I am going to want to send some dragon dagger specs during this as well to get a little more DPS. When the dial reaches that full moon, we do have the blood rain attack. I click a lot during this attack. Just every time I see an empty tile, I keep clicking on it. You don't have to move as much as I do. Overall, it's pretty easy to dodge this one. As we return to normal attacks, I was getting kind of close to KOing it before getting the next spec, and for the full run, I wanted to show the Jaguar attack, so you'll notice I step back once to make sure I don't quite KO it. The Jaguars spawn in, I run over to the highlighted spot, and then you just step back. It's once every 6 ticks, and I'm just looking for when the blood spot is finished growing is when I'm stepping back. Now when the attacks resume, she hits me pretty hard, healing for like 50 plus health, so maybe I should have skipped that Jaguar attack if I could have. But we still get the KO. Now we have all 3 moons killed. We can go over to the loot room and see that we get a nothing. Finally, let's talk about the rewards. The lunar chest is located in the ancient shrine, and you can loot this chest after you kill at least 1 of the moons. There is some regular loot, which is mostly nice for Iron Men, like herbs, tree seeds, soft clay, water orbs, even some bone shards for nice banked prayer XP. The unique rewards that you can receive depends on which moon that you have killed. Each moon has its own set of gear. You have the Eclipse Moon with the Atlatl, the Blue Moon with the Spear, and the Blood Moon with the dual Makuhitals. When you kill one of the moons, you have a 1 in 56 chance to receive one of their items from their set. You do not have to kill all 3 moons to loot the chest, so you could just grind one of them if you happen to only need an item from them, but that's really only helpful for Iron Men. As a main, I would send all 3 bosses, which gives you a chance of about 1 in 19 to get a unique item. The GP per hour doesn't get super high since the regular loot is not too expensive. You mostly get some good GP if you pull a good piece of gear. At the moment, the average loot per chest is about 185k, which includes getting uniques. The kills per hour you get is going to vary depending on your stats, your gear, and just how good you are at the content. The more you grind it, the faster your trips are going to be. So you could get 10 to 12 kills an hour at a very high pace, but your first couple of trips will probably take you a little bit longer, so maybe closer to like 6 kills an hour on the low end. This averages out to 1.1 to 2.2 GP an hour, which is pretty much pure profit since you don't really have to bring in any supplies with you. Overall, the Moons of Peril isn't huge for GP an hour, but it's great for learning some bossing mechanics and getting sort of like a mini raid run-in, kind of like Barrows content, which is how it was pitched as like the next generation of Barrows content. If you have any questions about the Moons of Peril, let me know in the comments and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. If you enjoyed the guide or you just got some useful information out of it, be sure to like and subscribe for more content. Thank you for watching, and best of luck on your Moons of Peril grinds.